The New York Mets may never lose another baseball game again. It's MLB trade deadline week, and could Mark Vientos be done as a New York Met? All of that, the focus of this, the Bleav in Mets podcast, episode number 73. Chris Schubert, Jack McKessie back with you here once again on the show. Jack, it feels like one of those weeks in this business doing a podcast every day where you just worry about the moment you put the episode out. Something's going to happen that undoes everything that you just said the previous half hour, but we will march ahead. We'll recap the series against the Giants. We'll get you ready for the Padres series. We'll do some trade deadline predictions. We'll do it all. And then the moment I press record, the Mets will do something.
I have Twitter open on my second screen over here. So if you see me glancing over and over again, it's because I'm constantly refreshing Jeff Passan's Twitter feed to see if anything happens. Today, he's broken two stories, neither of which had to do with the trade deadline. So I'm glad that we are not a Guardians or Phillies podcast, but there were some interesting stories.
Yeah, the Emmanuel Clase being suspended, or put on paid leave for being caught up in the MLB sports betting investigation. Bryce Harper telling the commissioner of the sport to get the bleep out of his clubhouse was certainly something to start my day. Yep. But what also started the day is waking up knowing that the New York Mets have a 1.5 game lead in the NL East and just finished off a 3-game sweep of the San Francisco Giants, increasing their winning streak to 7 games. They just keep on finding ways to win. And I think that's my big takeaway, Jack, from this series is 3 games, 3 wins, a sweep. But all 3 games are different. All 3 games had a little bit of a different theme to them that showed that the Mets, even though they continue to struggle to hit with runners in scoring position, even though we worry about the production that they're getting from center field, all those concerns still exist. They are able to find a way to win. That's the mark of a good, dare I say, great baseball team, and the Mets showed that over the weekend.
That is exactly how I felt about this series over the weekend, Chris, with every win feeling like I was seeing glimpses of the 2024 Mets again. Like every time there was a part of the team that I was a little anxious about, they stepped up and picked up the pieces for whoever was slacking that day. So game 1, it was the bats were just on fire. It's always nice to see the guys that you expect to be hitting the way that we thought going into the season come out and have a game like they did in the first game of the series. Second game of the series, it was all about the pitching and all about the bottom of the order with the young Mets. And then the third game of the series, you battle back from behind. Kodai Senga didn't have it, gave up a couple home runs to Matt Chapman. And again, Ronnie Mauricio, one of the baby Mets, having, I think, his career game to this point with 4 for 5?
4 for 4. 4 for 4, 2 doubles, a home run, a single, triple short of the cycle. Played some good defense. I put it in the podcast notes. The Ronnie Mauricio game, his best game to date as a member of this Mets roster. I mean, you want every game to look like Friday night's game. You want every game to be that comfortable, that free and easy. Your starter is able to go out there, give you 5 innings. You can go to your not super high leverage arms to get you the rest of the way there because you have a nice, comfortable lead. That's the way you wish every game went as a manager. It hasn't always been that easy for the Mets this season, but really good to see after finishing up the series at home against the Angels, traveling out west to take on a San Francisco Giants team that is in the middle of a playoff race. They're trying to push for one of those final wild card spots. So they've got just as much juice. They want these games just as badly as the Mets do. And for the Mets to go out there and put that stamp on the beginning of the series, I think set the tone for the rest of it. And Clay Holmes battled. I think we just need to start to come to terms with this is who Clay Holmes is at this point of the season. I think next year it'll be a lot different with his ability to go deep into games, but it just feels like 5 innings is going to be the end of the line every single night that Clay is out there. Now, tonight was a little different, or that Friday night, was a little different because they let him throw 104 pitches. So they let him empty the tank.
Right.
But it just feels like no matter what, he just gives it his all for those 5 innings. And then it's up to the bullpen, and it was Huascar Brazaban, it was Rico Garcia, and it was Juan Castillo out there for the Mets to close things out. A theme for the whole weekend, if there was one thread to pull on, Jose Castillo. I think I said Juan Castillo. The thread all weekend, the bullpen did not give up an earned run in any of the 3 games. And so when you get that type of production from your back end guys, super simple to win baseball games when it's going that well. So that was the story in game 1 of the series. Game 2, a pitcher's duel where the defense was the story for the Mets. Just excellent defense. turning a couple double plays. Pete Alonso reaching up into the sky to save Edwin Diaz.
This series for Pete Alonso's defensive critics was a bad one for the critics, because not just the leaping grab to end that game, which was incredibly clutch, but also like some of the scoops that he made on some poor throws. Like the dude was just balling out defensively, which was just a nice thing to see.
Yeah, and juxtapose that with the night that Rafael Devers had over at first base.
Yeah.
That happening in the same game. The fundamentals, those are the stuff that matters. Those are the things that help you win baseball games and help you, even when maybe the bats aren't firing on all cylinders, keep you in games. And the Mets just continue to do really well defensively. They keep stealing bases. And it was Mark Vientos with the big hit in this game, the 2 RBI double that gave the Mets the lead, flipped the script. And then the Mets were able to deploy the big boys, the back end of the bullpen, Reed Garrett, Ryan Stanek, Edwin Diaz, taking care of business in the second game of the series. And then the third game, Kodai Senga got the start. And concerned, worried, that's probably too strong. But after his last start, where he only went to 3 innings and had a bit of an implosion, I said Kodai Senga deserves the benefit of the doubt. The 31 starts prior, he had been great, 3 earned runs or less in all of those starts. He deserves a mulligan. If something starts to become a trend, then you get worried. But one start, one small, tiny blip on what has been a good start to Kodai Senga's big league career, I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'm a little worried now after this start, because the command is not there. What was it? 5 walks in this game for Kodai Senga. He did labor through 5 innings. Now, you could paint it 2 mistakes to Matt Chapman is the only difference in this game. If he doesn't make those 2 mistakes to Matt Chapman, could have been 5 zeros for Kodai Senga, and we're having a different story. But this is 2 starts in a row where he just hasn't looked super sharp. He's added that cutter. He was throwing that in this start, which I thought was interesting. So he's definitely trying to add to his arsenal and tweak and make these adjustments on the fly. Again, 5 innings, 3 earned runs or fewer. Was a fine start, all things considered, but the Mets need somebody other than David Peterson to step up and give them length and go past the 5th inning. And Kodai Senga would be the lead candidate to do so. And it just doesn't feel like that's in the cards right now.
I am still feeling like I need to give Kodai Senga the benefit of the doubt here. It's been not many. This is his 3rd start since returning from the injury, correct?
Yes.
And the last 2 have been rough. Like you mentioned on our last episode, we discussed a shaky start, and now this past one against the Giants in San Francisco. My counterpoint to anyone who's concerned or anyone who's thinking that this is starting to become a trend, we talked about a guy who you just mentioned who had a similar 2-start stretch of shaky outings, and that's David Peterson.
Yeah.
You look back at the end of June, he had back-to-back starts. He didn't even go 5 innings, gave up 5 earned runs in each of those starts, and I said at the time that I was getting a little bit concerned that if he didn't turn things around, maybe this is a trend. He has been the guy that consistently was pitching at an ace level. He was an all-star. And since then, he has not gone fewer than 6 innings. And that has been a huge boon for the Mets bullpen and the ability to not tax their relievers. So I'm not saying Kodai Senga is due for a breakout in the next game, which I believe will be again against the Giants, but this time at home. I just am saying that we've seen it happen in the past where pitchers had a couple rough outings, and I trust in Senga. I trust in Jeremy Hefner. I trust in the rest of the Mets pitching development staff to be able to figure out what's going wrong. Maybe it's the timing of certain pitches, like when he's deciding to throw the ghost fork versus the cutter. Maybe it's a mechanics thing, but I think they're going to be able to figure it out and have him return to a 1B level form as a rotation member.
Long term, I'm still a buyer in this rotation. I still believe in this rotation, but it does feel like we are at a very critical point of the season because, well, I'll just name them, and every single starter has something going on, right? Sean Manaea, we're still waiting for him to be truly all the way back. It's been fine. It's been good. It's been solid, but it has not been hashtag our ace. Clay Holmes, there's just a limit on what he's able to give you right now. It feels like 5 innings and he's done most nights. David Peterson has been consistent, but you still have the worries of the under the hood stuff. pointing to a regression at some point. He's just been avoiding it for a year and a half, almost 2 seasons now. But that there is that worry underneath that could bubble up to the surface. Kodai Senga, we just mentioned the issues that he's been going through. And Frankie Montas, again, you're just waiting for that little bit more from Frankie Montas, but I think overall he's been fine. So it just feels like a very critical juncture for this rotation. And you're just waiting for some guys to break out, step up. And it just takes one, right? It just takes Sean Manaea to get back to being the guy he was last year. Kodai Senga giving us those flashes. Clay Holmes breaking through and taking a start into the 6th inning, potentially into the 7th inning. Then all of a sudden you feel better about things. But just right now, it feels like you're on a little bit of a knife's edge.
The thing that has been frustrating is there are so many outings that we watch where Mets pitchers go 5 innings and that's it. Like Clay Holmes, it's been a consistent thing over the past few starts. Frankie Montas has been pretty consistent, 5 innings, and he's done. And then Manaea, Senga, I think as they're working back from injury, have been around 5 innings each for some of their recent starts as well. Peterson's like the only guy that's really giving the Mets depth. And I'm not asking for a ton here. I would just like to see, like you said, Chris, 1 or maybe 2 more guys more consistently working into the 6th, into the hopefully 7th innings, because it's just 1 extra inning, maybe 2 if you count the 7th. But that starts to add up when you think about the taxation on the bullpen arms. If every single game they're having to trot out guys in the 6th inning, sometimes even as early as the 5th, and it just is not going to bode well long term. And I mean, you said it, like we need to see more length at the very least from these guys, and hopefully with some of the same results of keeping the earned runs down as well.
Well, you saw it on full display in the finale of this series with the way that Carlos Mendoza had to very aggressively use his bullpen and use Jose Butto, get Gregory Soto in there for his Mets debut. I want to talk about that here in a second. Then go to Reed Garrett, then go to Brooks Raley, then go to Edwin Diaz. And I'm watching the game play out, and I'm thinking to myself, well, once he brings Reed into the game, all right, Reed's done on Monday. And then everything's setting up for Edwin in the 9th. And you're like, okay, Edwin's done on Monday because they both work back-to-back days. And then you're doing the math in your head. Well, okay, Soto could potentially work back-to-back days. Brooks Raley could potentially work back-to-back days, although I think they would try to avoid that coming off of the injury. They held back Stanek, and you start to do the math, and you're like, all right, I feel somewhat okay, somewhat good about the options that the Mets could have on Monday. But because they have to use it, this is the product of winning, right? You don't use your closer most of the time unless you're winning games. So good problem to have. But it feels like the Mets are using their bullpen pretty heavily right now. And hence why all of the conversation around the trade deadline is adding additional arms. Well, the one arm they did add, Gregory Soto, made his Mets debut and looked great. Sinker had life, had some great movement, 97, 98. Sweeper looked good. Not surprising that the guy gets to the New York Mets, and the sweeper, which was like his 3rd or 4th pitch, he uses it like 2nd most out of his arsenal. Not surprised whatsoever.
Yeah, it was good to see. I mean, it's a nice debut for him, going scoreless. The 1 strikeout as well on that filthy sweeper, which was, again, fun to watch. But I just think when you look at what the Mets bullpen has been, I almost wonder if they're trying to look at guys who they can see give them multiple innings. I wonder if they're going to try to push that with Gregory Soto, who has not done a ton of multi-inning work from my research when he first came over. And you look at guys like Rico Garcia and Jose Castillo being able to work multiple innings in the first game of the series. And we talked about the Mets rotation not being able to give depth. When I look at the needs for this team, I don't just see a bullpen arm, but I see one that might need to take a couple of innings, not necessarily a bulk reliever, but a reliable guy that can give you multiple innings, like a Reed Garrett, like a Huascar Brazoban, to kind of take some of the extreme pressure that those guys have had off.
Yeah, it's interesting to see if they go for another Max Kranick type, right? A guy who can give you multiple innings. And then you get back to what was so good about this bullpen at the beginning of the year, where you had Huascar Brazoban, you had Jose Butto, you had Max Kranick, and you basically interchanged those guys every day as your multi-inning, get it to the big guns in the 8th and the 9th. And so I wonder if they look to potentially get another guy like that. We'll use that to transition into a topic that I wanted to bring up with you, because there's a lot of talk about the Mets making trades this week. A lot of talk about what it's going to take for them to add a potential center fielder, to add a bullpen arm. And something that was dropped via Andy Martino of SNY this morning is that the Mets have been willing, apparently, in these trade talks to part ways with Mark Vientos. And we can discuss Vientos in particular, but I think the main place I want to take this, Jack, is would you trade any of the baby Mets? And for the sake of this conversation, the baby Mets are Beatty, Mauricio, Vientos. Those are the three guys that I would put in to this bucket as the Mets try to maybe solve this logjam positionally that they have. Are you comfortable moving any of those three guys?
At this point, I would say no. And the one guy you excluded from that group, and I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional, but I think of the young guys, the young infielders the Mets have deployed this year, Luis Angel Acuna is probably the one that I'd point to.
He was purposely left out of the conversation
because I think he doesn't quite give you the same versatility. He doesn't really have that third base range that Mauricio and Beatty and Vientos have. So his speed is nice. His contact bat is nice. But as far as like future contributions and what I can envision for this group of young infielders, it's Beatty, it's Vientos, it's Mauricio as the guys that I see having the longest term future as potential like stars in this lineup.
Well, and the other reason I left Acuna out wasn't homegrown. They acquired him in the trade. Those other three guys were drafted, signed, developed by the New York Mets and came up through their system. And I want to talk about Vientos in particular because I quote tweeted the SNY tweet this morning about that the Mets have discussed Vientos in these trade talks. And I'll read verbatim from my tweet. I said, I'll reserve full judgment until we get to late Thursday afternoon, but boy, does it feel like a big mistake to sell low on Vientos. And that's the part that I want to hone in on. You would be selling at the absolute bottom of Mark Vientos as a player. And so just on the surface, that doesn't seem like something David Stearns would do. He would not sell low on a player like Mark Vientos. And I don't want to be accused of being a prospect hugger or holding on to somebody, but I don't have to go very far back into my memory, and my memory is not very good, but I don't have to go back very far to watch a Mark Vientos season where he was arguably the best hitter in the lineup, was the best hitter on the team in the postseason, was hitting in the 2 spot and contributing. And so I just can't get that out of my brain. And because of that, after one bad season, and a reminder, because I don't know if many people really know this, he's 25 years old. This is not a prospect who's 27, 28, 29, had that one good year, and now has fallen back to reality. This is a player who is still 25 years old. And so, to me, I'd go down with the guys that I have. I'd go down with Vientos and Beatty and Mauricio playing at third. They're all in some ways contributing as of late. Mauricio had the game on Sunday. Beatty's been swinging a hot bat as of late. Vientos had the big hit on Saturday night to give the Mets the lead. So it's not like none of them are contributing. They're all contributing. And so while it would be difficult, it's a tough thing for Carlos Mendoza to manage on a daily basis. I'm holding on to these guys. I'm not trading any of them. I'm trying to get my bullpen arm, a potential starter for my rotation, a center fielder. I'm looking to do that in other ways, and I'm keeping those three guys.
I'm with you, Chris. I just feel like this has all of the makings of a sad mistake looking like if we're in the future looking back, because I mean, especially because Vientos recently has been much better than he was for pretty much the whole first half of the season. He's been hitting the ball hard. He's been contributing in the lineup. He's had some nice defensive plays, honestly, over the last couple of series. And he's the DH right-handed bat that works when you're not going to someone like Starling Marte, or, you know, if you want to give Pete an off day or for whatever reason. I just think that the potential that Vientos has and the ceiling that we saw, a potential ceiling that we saw of the 2024 season, the postseason, the potential that he ends up becoming this incredible power hitting third baseman for another team is like very easy to envision. It's like you said, it's not, you don't have to go that far back to look at what he can contribute for a team.
And again, there's the concerns about his defense. Sure. I get that 100%. Obviously there's concerns there. He may profile more as a DH. Right now, his bat speed isn't there. He's not hitting for a ton of power. And if you're going to play him at the DH spot, he has to provide that power. I'm not saying that Mark Vientos isn't a flawed player, and he is struggling this season. But again, 2024 is less than a year ago. Like we haven't even gotten a chance to get to the postseason where he was great last year. It hasn't even been a full year since that point. We're under the brightest lights, the largest stage. He was awesome for this team. And so maybe I'll be a year too late on getting value for Mark Vientos. Maybe that'll be a mistake, but I just don't feel comfortable moving him right now. Now, again, if they trade him as part of a larger package to get a frontline ace or to get a player that none of us are talking about right now, it's a different conversation. Hence why the beginning of my tweet says I'm going to reserve full judgment until Thursday. But if they trade Mark Vientos for Luis Robert, I know that's been floated around. That's a mistake. It's really the first thing that David Stearns would have done that I would have fully disagreed with. And perhaps it works out and Luis Robert, change of scenery, hits 25 home runs the rest of the season and is this year's version of Yoenis Cespedes. Like perhaps that's possible, but it just doesn't feel like a move that I can get behind. Let's preview the Padres series real quick, and then I want to end with some trade deadline predictions because the next time you're going to hear from us is probably on Thursday because we'll have to. I don't think we're going to recap this Padres series, just to be honest with everybody, because Thursday is the trade deadline. And so we'll probably wait to record the episode until the trade deadline is done. Maybe we'll touch on the Padres during that series. But the Mets start a 3-game series in San Diego tonight. They will look to go for their 8th straight win. They will look to go for their 3rd consecutive series win. Things are looking very good for the New York Mets, despite all of the debates that we're having here on the program. It's Frankie Montas against Dylan Cease tonight. It's Sean Manaea, Yu Darvish on Tuesday. And then in the finale of the series, it is Clay Holmes against Nick Pivetta. So the Mets will look to get those starters deep into the game. Tonight's an interesting one because they do not have Edwin Diaz. They do not have Reed Garrett. So you want this game to go one of two ways. You want this game to be a laugher for the Mets to where they can use their lower leverage arms and get everybody ready for Tuesday and Wednesday. Or you want it to be a laugher in the other direction to where you can get Soto the day off, you can get Brooks Raley the day off, you can get Reed and all those guys the day off, and then you're fully ready to go for Tuesday. I think the worst thing for the Mets is to play this close 5-4, 6-5 game where they have to use their high leverage arms and then they lose because then it's just going to set you up poorly for Tuesday and Wednesday for the rest of the series. So the Mets need what happened on Friday night in San Francisco. They really need a game like that tonight on Monday. And so we'd love to see them pour some runs on Dylan Cease early and often in this one to give Carlos Mendoza a little bit more breathing room for the game tonight.
Yeah, I guess the good news that the Mets have is that the Padres, the last couple of series, haven't been great coming out of the All-Star break. They just split with the Cardinals, and before that, they lost a series to the Marlins in Miami. So, the Mets looking obviously really good on their 7-game win streak, and you hope that they're able to sustain some of that offensive firepower, like you said, from that first night in San Francisco when they head down south to San Diego.
Let's close with a couple of trade deadline predictions. How many do you want to make, Jack? 2, 3? You set the number. I can do as many as you want. You want 10 predictions? I'll give you 10 predictions.
Give me 2. Give me 2.
You want 2 trade deadline predictions. All right, so I have 2 trade deadline predictions for the New York Mets. Prediction number 1, the New York Mets will not add a bat at the deadline. They will roll with the crew that they have. There will not be an addition in center field. There will not be a second baseman to kick Jeff to center field permanently. The Mets will roll with the roster that they have. You don't have to like the prediction. That is just my prediction. And then the bullpen arm that the New York Mets will add at the deadline, David Bednar will be the addition to the bullpen. That is who they will go and trade for from the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Is there a reason you like Bednar in particular?
Well, Emmanuel Clase is no longer available. They cannot trade for Emmanuel Clase.
Right. Sure.
I read a story in The Athletic this morning that talked about the Mets and their walk rate and trying to go after pitchers that don't have a high walk rate. David Stearns doesn't care about that. He just gets relievers that he thinks are good. Remember, Bednar got sent down earlier this season and had to work on some things, and then they brought him back up, and he's been doing really well. I don't think the price is going to be that high for Bednar compared to a Griffin Jax, let's say, from Minnesota, or Clase is no longer available, but any of the other big arm types. I think Bednar comes at a little bit of a cheaper cost. And the Athletic story that I read this morning, I think it was from Tim Britton or Will Salmon, one of the two. They both do great jobs. I forget who had the byline on the story. I'll give them both shout outs. Mentioned that Bednar has a curve, and that is something that nobody else in the bullpen has. And we know David Stearns loves to prioritize having a bunch of guys and having all those guys do different stuff and having different arm slots and pitch mixes. And yes, he likes his sinker sweeper guys, but getting somebody that maybe has a different look to be a part of the back end of that bullpen might be nice. And so that's my prediction for Bednar. And again, Pittsburgh is a very obvious seller. Some of these other teams, I don't know if they're super obvious sellers, and so it's easy to just pick from a team that you know is going to sell here at the deadline.
Yeah, I mean, he's no Caleb Ferguson, but like,
well, Gregory Soto is your Caleb Ferguson. I apologize, but that's what you're going to get.
He's a lefty. If I had to make a prediction, Chris, the more I keep hearing about it, I feel like there is a chance that the Mets add a center fielder at the deadline here. I don't know who it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be Luis Robert, but that athletic story that you mentioned, they mentioned Harrison Bader. They mentioned Dane Myers from the Marlins. He's a defense first guy who punishes left-handed hitting. And they said, this is the kind of player they expected Tyrone Taylor to be coming into this year. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's a more under the radar move. He's got an OPS plus of 86, but it's really that left-handed pitching matchup that you really want to get out of Myers. So I could see that being the case, and the Mets not necessarily giving up someone like Vientos or any of their top prospects, but a guy who has some team control for a while as a pre-arb player.
I'm just suspicious of the Mets trading for a center fielder specifically because of what it does to their roster. Jesse Winker is going to come back here at some point, you would expect. What does that do for Tyrone Taylor, right? What does it do for his roster spot? I mean, somebody has to go off of this team, and Luis Torrens, the backup catcher, he's not going anywhere. Luis Angel Acuna, maybe he's in the trade. Starling Marte is hitting the cover off the ball right now. He's not moving anywhere. And I still think the Mets like what Tyrone Taylor offers defensively. So I think they'd like to keep that spot. So it's a bit of a roster juggle. Whereas if you get a second baseman, you can move Acuna in the deal for a second baseman, right? You then get a second baseman, you move McNeil to center field, and at least you have some of the same issues you have now. We're trying to find Beatty time, Mauricio time, Vientos time. You still have that same issue. A center fielder, unless Tyrone's going back in the deal, it just feels like there's a roster problem. And so that's why I think my prediction of them not adding a bat at all is why I felt so strongly about it. But we'll see. I just have been very steadfast that everybody talking about them adding a bat just hasn't listened to David Stearns at all here in the last couple of days and weeks where he's met with the media. But we'll see. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And I went out on a limb with Bednar. I mean, not out on a limb, but I called my shot with a specific name.
Sure. Yeah. And then I guess my other prediction would be I don't think the Mets add a starter. I don't think they're at all in the market for an ace level pitcher. We've talked about it, Chris. They have too many guys ready to contribute at the major league level, or at least very, very close in minor leagues. And so I just don't see a reason for them to go that way, especially with Senga back healthy and Manaea back and Montas working his way up into maybe more depth in the future. I don't think that it's necessarily as big a need as the bullpen is clearly the number one for the Mets.
If the Mets added a starter here at the deadline, it is a bona fide ace that can start a game one of a playoff series. That player does not exist on the market right now. So unless it's a player that's not being discussed, like Dylan Cease, I don't think fits that bill. He's probably the closest thing to it, and I don't even know if he's fully available. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I know there have been reports that they maybe offered Cease. There's these weird reports that have been refuted, and we're not really sure of whether or not they offered Cease for Jarren Duran from the Red Sox, and that would actually be a pretty sick deal for both sides if they actually did it. But just I don't think there's that bona fide frontline starter that is available because again, Paul Skeens is not available.
No.
Sandy Alcantara isn't been that guy this year, so I don't think there's that bona fide number one. I think they'd rather just go with the guys that they have in house. The next time,
very interesting timing to trade for Dylan Cease if they did that. But again, I don't think they will.
They're going to get a nice up close and personal view tonight in game one of the series about Dylan Cease. The next time you hear from us, business will be done. The New York Mets will probably have some more players that have been added to their roster. Perhaps one of the baby Mets, one of the young prospects in this system could be on the move. We will be here to break it all down, potentially recap the San Diego series. I think the level in which we recap the Padres series will be a direct reflection of how much activity the Mets have at the deadline. A lot of activity, not a lot of talk about the Padres. Little activity, a lot of talk about the Padres series. So we're back on Thursday after the deadline to break everything down and then get you ready for the second half of the season because the Mets will be making moves in an attempt to finish off this push to win the NL East, to get back to the postseason and hopefully go further than they did a year ago. If you are new here, please rate, review, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast, whatever app you're listening to us on, whatever podcast service you use. Please rate, review, subscribe, share the show with a friend friend. You can watch the show on YouTube, the video version. Just search Jack McKessy, McKessy on YouTube, and you can catch all the video versions of the show. The next time you hear from us, there will be some new members. That is a prediction I believe in. New members of the New York Mets roster, and so we will break it all down. And as always, let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.